Hello and welcome to the Science Fiction and Fantasy Marketing Podcast, the show where we help you establish your author brand, increase the size of your audience, and sell more books. I'm Lindsay Baroker, and I'm here with one co-host this week.
I'm Joe Lallo.
And Jeff was traveling this week. We were going to skip a week and wait until he got back, but we decided we're just continuing answering the questions that we got for last week's episode. So Joe and I will do our best to answer them, and actually Jeff wrote down some of his answers. So if we deem it useful enough, we will we will go ahead and throw in the answer of the person who is not here. Do you have any news, Joe, before we jump into the questions?
Nothing major. It's only been a week, so I'm several thousand words further along in part 2 of my urban fantasy trilogy, and I got the cover for the first book. So technically, the first book is completely ready for release, but again, I'm holding on to all 3 until the summer. So that's it.
All right, cool. Well, you'll have to let me know when you launch. I want to spy on you and see how your adventures in urban fantasy go. And those that were here last week know I'm also kind of doing the same thing with the sci-fi series. I'm going to shoot for, I think, May for the release of mine. I'm editing the first book now, and I want to do the second and third before releasing. And of course, as is typical for me, I got an idea for like a side story that I want to write. Set in the same universe, and maybe it'll be different characters, but I might be able to kind of use it, put an excerpt of book 1 in the main series in the back, so at least it's not completely different genre or something. Other news is we're going to take a little break from the show probably for a couple months, just a little bit burned out, I think, especially myself. The guys are easier and go on with anything, but I feel like we've been tired of talking about the same stuff for 200 odd episodes, and I need a little bit of a break. But if you guys have really been enjoying the show and have some thoughts about what we should talk about in the future that's not just kind of going over and over the same stuff, hopefully you can come by marketingsff.com and leave a comment. Let us know, do you like the author interviews? Should we keep doing those for the most part? Do you like it when we answer questions? Do you find our answers useful when we answer questions? That's always, I always want to make sure we're putting out something that's useful for people. So let us know how you feel. And at this moment, we're just saying it's a break for a couple months to maybe recharge a bit. And after we release our new series, both of us, and I guess Jeff's working on Corgi Mysteries right now. We'll see what's going on, and if we're all refreshed and ready to come back for the summer. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and answer the questions that we did not get to last week. All right, first one is from John. How do you approach marketing an audiobook? Advertising specifically to audiobook listeners, or reliance on general traffic to your product page combined with having the audiobook simultaneously ready to go with the ebook release?
All right, so for this one, I've only ever really relied upon general traffic to the book page to sell audiobooks. This is largely because I've only ever had one audiobook ready for the release. And even then, it was ready on the first day, but not actually through the sales channels for several days. So, and it's far too recent to know if that one was a particularly marketing success because it's traditionally published. So the amount of lag on finding out how well it did on launch day is measured in months rather than hours. So yeah, mostly I will just use regular standard book advertising and the fact that the books are linked as a way to sell them. And because they are usually not available on the same day, I actually use the release of an audiobook as an excuse to give another bump for advertising the entire series again. So I sell more of the audiobook because, I've announced it as a thing that's available, but I also tend to sell more of the ebook once the audiobook comes out just because it made it visible again to people who might have missed it.
For myself, I've always done okay with audiobooks. I haven't really knocked it out of the park with anything. The one exception is my Dragon Blood box set, which we released from the beginning as a box set. And so it was like 30 hours of audio content, and that's done pretty well. That's kind of been my bestseller. And every time I'm lucky enough to get a BookBub ad on the ebook box set, like about once a year, I seem to be able to get one for dropping it to free. That gives me a boost to that audiobook, which helps give a boost to all the audiobooks in the series are out now. And so yeah, we've had a few folks on that have done a little bit with, if you do through Audible, if you're exclusive through ACX and Audible, you can get the 25 coupon codes and you can play around with at least getting some early reviews and that kind of thing. I haven't. It seems like most of the folks who just do really well, they happen to catch on Audible itself. And one thing you can do, of course, is try to advertise direct to the audiobook on Audible. If you can kind of target, like with Facebook, I think you can target people who have selected audiobooks as an interest or Audible. I haven't played that much with it. The best return of result is advertising the ebook for me, and then having the audiobook be linked, and people go up, and especially if it's Whisper or is WhisperSync the word I'm looking for, where they sell it. It used to be like $1.99, but now it's like if you buy the ebook, you can get the audiobook for $7.29 or $7.49 or something. And I have, to answer the first part of John's question, or the end of it, I've definitely had the best luck. I think it was only with one series I've managed to release book one audiobook on the same day as book one in the series, and that definitely helps. So if you are doing the rapid release thing and you're holding on to the first 3 ebooks, or until you've completed the first 3 ebooks, and you can get book one into production as an audiobook and release it at the same time, it's always easier to get momentum, it seems like, at the launch. It's not saying you can't later with sales and big promos and pushes, but that's a really good time. And all the time you're promoting the ebook and you don't have the audiobook available, you're potentially losing out on sales. So it's a little harder when you're like, I've done a lot of my audiobooks through Podium Publishing, so I don't have as much control over when the audiobook will be released in that case. Usually they'll be farther back than if I did it myself with my own narrator. So the one I did, Agents of the Crown, where I had them simultaneous, that was just all, I did it all on my own. And yes, those have actually earned out. Some of my older backlist stuff that I've just kind of gradually been producing when I have money and time to sink into it, it's taken a lot longer. So there's that to be said. If you can get the first one, at least, usually if you're a fast writer, it slows down. Like you actually write, at least in my case, I'll have the ebooks ready to publish faster than the audiobooks can be produced. So eventually, like we're about to get the 5th one out, the 5th and final one in that series. And the 5th ebook came out beginning of December, I think.
I'll say 2 things here. First, if I'm going to throw in Jeff's answer, Jeff says that his producer that works with him to make the audiobooks does an admirable job of getting the word out. So that's where he weighs in. And while I have no experience with it, there is a thing now called Chirp that is somehow associated with BookBub, and it is for promoting and perhaps distributing audiobooks. I'm not sure. The reason I say the distributing thing is because they somehow are also associated with Findaway Voices, because I heard about this from both Findaway Voices and BookBub. So some kind of audiobook promotional option is becoming available through BookBub, and I'm sure a lot of people are very excited. I just haven't looked into exactly what the deal is.
Right. I think you have to sign up for Chirp. I think there's a waiting list right now. So even if you don't have something ready, it might be good to put it out there. And I'll be checking into that myself, since I have one series now that's with Findaway Voices. So it's non-exclusive and would be available for price promotions and discounting and the things you need to do in order to get a BookBub. That is the thing, is if you're with ACX or a publisher, you're not going to have the pricing control you need for this. So if you've been thinking about producing one and not going exclusive, it may be time to give it a try. All right, Jim asks, would any of you consider doing another start from scratch pen name experiment?
Yes. The official answer I have on here is yes, next question, because I was going to be sly about this. But yes, there have been some mechanisms in place in my head. I have some files somewhere, which, if they were ever to see the light of day, would not see the light of day under Joseph Lalo. They would be someone else. But that hasn't happened yet. And as far as anyone knows, it never will.
All right, then. My answer is maybe. My problem with, I did my pen name Ruby Lionstrake in, I think it was 2014. I did one series, and then a year or two later, another series. And the thing with the pen name and the real author name is that once you stop releasing them, it's really hard to keep the momentum going. You can sink a certain amount of money into advertising, especially if you're really good at the advertising and can keep things going. I tend to, with my own name, a lot of how I keep things going is by releasing new books and starting new series. because that's the most fun part of marketing to me is just writing new stuff and putting it out there. So the problem with the pen name is that sales will fall off if you walk away from it, basically, probably to nothing. I haven't looked at what Ruby's doing for a while, but nothing substantial. Every now and then I will try to get some like an e-reader News Today or some of the, I was never able to do real well with BookBub on Ruby. I think they don't really have a sci-fi romance category is why I believe they have the paranormal romance, and that's the closest you can get, which is not really the same as outer space and Star Wars and Firefly with romance. So anyway, my point is it's hard. It's really hard to keep two going. I probably wouldn't do a third one just because I hate letting things go. I hate putting the effort into something that's not going to keep selling. One of the things I love about books, is like my Emperor's Edge series still continues to sell probably 6 years after I've completed it and moved on to other stuff. And I haven't even done a new installment in it, much to the chagrin of the fans of that series. So if you're doing, I will see people that do pen names just to try stuff, to try a new genre or to try like erotica or just something that they don't want people to know about. And I see nothing wrong with it. But like I said, because of my experience of like, you really have to have a whole social media presence, or you should, or at least an email address, mailing list, and a website for the pen name. It's extra work to start it, and it's hard to keep it going. So if you're okay with writing something and putting it out there and then realizing 3 years from now it's not going to be selling anymore, if you just kind of moved away from that, go for it. Or if you're thinking maybe the pen name will become your new name and the new thing you're going to put all your effort into, nothing wrong with that either. But in my case, having all the experience and knowing how it goes, I don't know that I would do it again. I'm pretty content right now writing stuff for myself, and I may do another series for my pen name someday, but probably will not be starting a new one. And Jeff says he has not done one yet, but he would consider it. So. All right, Sean asks, let's say an indie author has exactly one book out. Let's also say they didn't do the rapid release thing at all, nor much in the way of ads. Is the best practice still finish the series and build a backlist, or should they try some ads now?
Yeah, both. Non-rapid release stuff still works, just not as well. My entire career to this point, including now, so 5 years of being a full-time author, are built upon what is by indie standards a very slow release schedule. I have multiple series, and very seldom does a series get more than one new entry per year. So as far as the rapid release technique is concerned, I'm releasing one book a year, even though I'm releasing 3 or 4, because they're not in a series, so they're not building any momentum. So yeah, certainly you want to have a backlist. That's where your money is going to come from eventually. And until then, experiment with advertising. If ideally you're going to get better at advertising through practice, and thus when you do have a backlist, you're going to be good at advertising it. Just keep your investment low until you've got things in place to actually hit big, because if you pump a whole lot of money into a single book, it's very hard to make it profitable because there's not a whole lot of money to be made off of a single book. So keep get good at advertising, but small numbers until you've got the ability to make that money back.
Yeah, I would definitely put the focus in writing more books. But like Joe said, if you want to practice, if you want to play, there's one thing advertising allows you to do with like AMS ads or Facebook ads. It's kind of, especially when you only have one book, it's not that confusing, especially if it's not selling. So you really easily can tell what the advertising efforts are doing as far as your sales, if the things are working. And you can kind of tell like how many clicks you have to get to make a sale. And then that can tell you, like, if it's taking 30 clicks to make a sale of your book, that like, hey, your blurb is probably not striking the chord with the audience you're targeting. And yeah, I think we had Brian Meeks, I want to say, he was the one that was saying you try to get down to like 1 in 10, like 10 clicks results in a sale from the blurb, which is basically ad copy if you think about it for your book. So that is something which it's actually easier to practice right now with one book, and especially if it's not selling too well. I would go ahead and raise the price of your book to like $5, $6 if you're going to play with the advertising and you don't have a series of other stuff for people to buy. That gives you a little wiggle room. You can spend 10, 30-cent clicks to get a sale and break even, or even do a little better. And especially if the book's not selling anyway, there's really nothing to be gained of having it hanging out at 99 cents. You might as well, if you're going to get a sale, it might as well be for $5 or $6. So that's, I guess, do you have any more thoughts on that, Joe?
Nope.
All right, I guess that is our thoughts on that question. Jeff agrees with Joe. So experiment while building your backlist. Okay, Brendan asks 2 questions. Number 1, is $2.99 too much to ask for a 60,000 word urban fantasy novel as a new writer? We'll answer that first. Go ahead.
I would say, just first off, don't put too much weight on new writer in terms of pricing. You're like, your first book obviously is probably going to be your worst book just because of getting better at being a writer. But that being said, I wouldn't worry too much about the fact that you're new being a reason to lower the price of your book. But I know that urban fantasies tend to run pretty short. We've talked to some folks on the show that say that the average urban fantasy isn't much more than 50,000 words. So 60,000 words at $2.99, I think that's pretty reasonable. So no, that's a good price range, I'd say.
Yeah, I would go $2.99, maybe $3.99 for that word count. And if you're in Kindle Unlimited, you can kind of see how many people are actually buying versus how many are borrowing. If most people are borrowing, you could make the price higher and make it potentially more attractive to people that are doing the borrow thing. But if you drop it to 99 cents and suddenly you get a nice bump, especially if you try that as you do, get a promo on a site or something, then 99 cents can help you get the people who are maybe on the fence. They wouldn't necessarily, almost all of us are new authors to somebody. So like Joe said, I don't think that's a hugely important thing to worry about. Just how good is your blurb? Is the cover awesome? Is your sample really good? Because speaking only as a reader myself, if something is 99 cents, I really don't care if I threw away the money. But anything higher than that, I'm going to read the sample first. And if the sample doesn't grab me, forget it. If the sample is good, I'll drop $10 for the ebook and go on. But you got to make sure you're grabbing folks who do try before they buy. But overall, that seems fair for a price for a short-ish novel, but not too short. Number 2, do you guys have any tips on what you would do if you were starting out as a new author?
Okay, a couple of things I would do if I was starting out as a new author. This is based upon the things I wish I had done when I was starting out as a new author. Definitely have a website and a mailing list ready before you get started, because you want your first book to be driving stuff to your mailing list. Ideally, you'd then be using your mailing list to drive stuff to your next book. But definitely you want it to be in place before those are the first 2 things you do. Get those 2 things set up. I would also suggest we talk about rapid release here. It's tricky when you're first starting out to say write 5 books and then release them quickly. We don't know, you're going to be not the most honed writer at that time. So I would suggest what I would do is 2 books. I would do a 1 full-length novel and 1 novella, short story kind of thing. The novel is going to be what you're going to be trying to make money off of, and the other one is going to be either to drive people to your mailing list or just to give out as a sample to get them interested in buying book 1. So those are the big things I would do if I was just getting started as an author. Plus, pick a social media platform that I enjoy and, try to be engaging on it. But that's not so much going to help with sales as just to help engage readers and get them more excited about you, which will eventually help with sales. So it's that thing.
And social media can also be kind of an easy way to start a little bit of networking with other authors in your genre, especially if you've already read their books. It helps to reach out to people a little bit before you ask for hey, can you plug my new release? That's still kind of a big ask when you're a new author and you don't have a book they can look at and say, oh yeah, this has got a bunch of good reviews. So probably I'd be recommending something that's okay, or maybe even good. But I agree, get at least, even if it's just a 1-page website that has a mailing list sign up, get that up there first. You can use WordPress. It's free. It's blog software, but you can make pages with it too, not just blog posts. And web hosting is pretty inexpensive, around $5 a month. Registering your own domain name, I would get that early. And that's, what, $10? No, it's more than that a year. No, it's about 10, 15. They keep raising the price over on GoDaddy. We're noticing $10, $20 a year, you should be able to get that. So like maybe for $80 a year, it's all you're all in. Don't pay more than that for web hosting and a domain name. And if you think it's within your abilities to write 3 books, 3 novels, and release them kind of back to back and get the momentum going, nothing wrong with that. The rapid release works. That's how I got my pen name off to a good start. I released the first 3 novels back to back, and I made the first one, started out with it 99 cents and made it free as soon as I had the 3rd one out there. And she gained some pretty good momentum, considering I wasn't writing exactly to what you see. This was sci-fi romance with my pen name. It wasn't the most to market stuff I was writing, but there was an audience for it. So, but I feel like when I got started, that wasn't something I could do yet. Like I've talked about on the show, it took me 7 years to finish my first novel, do a few starts and stops in there. And then it was a very gradual process for me to get to be more prolific. So what I would do, and actually what I did accidentally almost right, is I had a short story that I had already written, I think for some anthology or something that it didn't sell to, that had the same characters, and it was kind of a fun, bantery, enough to intrigue the reader to want to read more about those characters. So I put that out at the same time with, I don't remember if I had an excerpt or just maybe a little bit about the book 1, but I definitely said like, hey, if you like these characters, you'll want to check out how they first met in the first book of this series. So if you could put together your first novel and have like a prequel novella or a tie-in short story to go with it that you're willing to give away for free. At the time, I did not know how to get a short story made free on Amazon. I used Smashwords to make it free at Barnes & Noble. And Barnes & Noble, coincidentally, is the first place I managed to start significantly selling books, at least by my standards back in those days. So that's probably what I do. If you can write the first 2 books, go for it. But if you just don't see yourself having the patience to wait, and if you're not, that prolific, a lot of people never get to that level, but most of us don't start out at that level, and unless you were already been ghostwriting and done 20 novels or something on the side. But definitely be thinking of something free you can give away as I'm going to say a teaser, but like my short story was a complete story. And I think that's important. I don't feel like the first 2-3 chapters work that well, as much as people want to see that you can satisfy them by giving a good ending. But at the same time, there's nothing wrong with teasing a little bit of what's going to go on in the entire novel if they pick it up. Alrighty. Jeff says also that $2.99 is just fine for a 60K urban fantasy novel. So got to get his answers in here. Mark asks, what is the difference between draft to digital and publish drive? Asking for a future me, as he has about 70 more days left in Kindle Unlimited.
Okay, I'm not terribly familiar with Publish Drive. I went and looked at it a little bit after I saw this question, and on the surface, they seem pretty similar. I still use Smashwords, which is, again, pretty similar. Of the 2 that were mentioned, and if I'm honest, of the 3 that I just mentioned, I would probably go with draft to digital just based upon their track record. Certainly their track record is probably longer than Publish Drive, and they're better known. Well, if I'm an example, they're better known than Publish Drive. And I happen to know that they have a much more user-friendly and newbie-friendly experience. So if you're asking for a recommendation, I would probably drive you toward draft to digital.
All right, and I'm with Smashwords because they were it when I got started, and I've just been kind of lazy to I didn't want to split my catalog across different distributors. And interestingly, Smashwords, I believe, and Draft to Digital and Publish Drive, each one of them has at least a couple stores that the other one doesn't distribute to. So if you want to, you can have your books in the full catalog with all of them and just pick, I only want to go to these stores with this distributor. And I'm actually going to direct you to the Creative Pen podcast. If you don't already listen, not that long ago, Joanna had the founder, I think it was, of Publish Drive on. I believe she's from Hungary, somewhere over there. So they seemed to be really into like getting into China and Eastern European markets, so might be worth checking out. Just because I haven't done it doesn't mean I don't think it's a good idea. And I'll try to snag the link to that podcast. I think that was 2 or 3 months ago, that show, and I'll put it in the show notes for us at what episode number are we, Joe? Let me pull up the site here. I think we are at okay, this is going to be 223. You can get the link to that podcast and then hear more about what else Publish Drive does. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the next question. Stephen, not sure if you need more questions for your next podcast. Of course we do. But do any of you use photos of yourself in the About the Author section of your books like traditional publishing does?
I do not have a photo of myself in my books. I almost don't have a photo of myself anywhere. Not because I like, it's probably not a terrible idea to do it. In general, it's usually a pretty good idea to do what you can to make your book look more like a traditionally published book. That being said, that mostly applies to paperbacks, and people aren't going to be picking, like, no one's going to open up your ebook to see what you look like. And I don't even know, like, I've bought a couple of traditional published books recently for ebooks, and I don't recall seeing front and back matter that had that stuff in it. So certainly in your ebook, I wouldn't worry too much about putting your picture. Again, in your paperback, you could, but most people aren't going to be buying your paperbacks off the shelf. So making the inside look like a traditionally published paperback is not super duper important. I guess the X-ray on Amazon would show it. But the reason I don't do it is because I don't have a professional headshot. And frankly, I don't have a professional head. So I don't know that my head is going to be selling any books. So I haven't put too much effort into using it for promotional materials.
Yes, there's a reason we podcast instead of doing YouTube videos, although I guess we do have a YouTube video for those that are willing to stream us for an hour. Yeah, I've never done it in ebooks. I don't think I've even seen it in ebooks. I feel like it's just one more little thing that could get messed up in the formatting. The nice thing about writing for adults novels is you're not usually, or just grown-up audiences, is you don't have to put pictures and diagrams and things. And for paperbacks, as Joe said, I don't bother because they're not going to be on a store on a bookshelf. And I do have it on my Amazon author page. It looks a little weird if you're surfing through Amazon author profiles and there's no, it sort of like looks like, hey, this is a pen name or something, because almost everybody puts their picture up there. You can decide how, if you want to get a professional author photo. I'm sure it's a good idea. I have a vacation photo of myself holding a baby alligator because I was grinning, and you'll never get as sincere of a smile from me if I'm standing in front of a camera posing for a professional author photo. So every now and then you do get asked for, like, if you're in an anthology or something, and I have to apologetically say, well, here's my alligator vacation photo. And I think Barnes & Noble once asked me for one, and I was like, sorry, I haven't really, not since high school have I gone into a studio and did it. But it doesn't cost that much. You could certainly do it. And if you're like hot, if you're a handsome guy or a pretty lady, you know, you never know. It might help some books, right? Okay. Phoenix had a bunch of questions, so we'll try to work through this. I'm not sure if that is a man or a woman. Sorry, Phoenix. Question number 1, ISBNs. Should we get our own or just use the free ones provided by Amazon, etc.? What's the difference? Pros and cons of each?
Okay, if you own the, this is based upon this is the knowledge that I have, but if you own the ISBN, it goes with you everywhere. That is the pro. If you get a free one, you need to get a new one if you ever choose to move away from the platform where you got the free one. Other than that, there's not a huge downside to the free version. There's a couple of things. When you own your own ISBN, your information is associated with the book as the publisher. If you get a free one, then the people who gave you the ISBN, their publisher information is on there. That is both a pro and a con, because you will actually get junk mail sometimes as a result of having your name associated with an ISBN. I've had it happen. A lot of it goes to my parents' house, because that's where I was when I bought my first batch of ISBN numbers. But yeah, other than that, I would go with free. I almost always do go with free, except if you have to buy your own, which I think is the case with Ingram Spark, in which case you can do both. And frankly, I do both because it's just easier that way.
Yeah, I always use the free ones for the ebooks. I just haven't been convinced that there's a reason to spend more money on that. Since I've started publishing some of the stuff with Ingram Spark, as well as no longer Create Space, but Amazon KDP Print, I think it's called. I've started, you do need your own ISBN. So, and we got called out on this a few months ago when we talked about this, because I said it, I did not say what I thought I said. I said it incorrectly. As long as ideally you only need one ISBN for your paperback edition of your book. It cannot be the same as the ebook ISBN, but like I end up often with 2 different ISBNs for paperbacks because I let Amazon, or I used Create Space and said, sure, use your free one. And then later I'm going to Ingram Spark, and you cannot use the free one from Create Space or KDP Print at Ingram Spark. So the ideal situation is to buy it, use it at Ingram Spark, and then also use it at Amazon when you do the print there. And that's what I'll be doing going forward. It's one of those, like, if you do one thing first and then it's a month later before you get around to doing the other thing and you already did the ISBN for free. So that's not ideally, you should just have one ISBN for your paperback. And audiobook, I don't even think Audible or Findaway has even asked me if I have an ISBN. Maybe they have. And I just said, nope, free one's good for that too. So it's really up to you. If you think you're going to publish a lot though, and go through a lot of them, it's worth, here in the US, it's pretty expensive. I feel like, is it $1,000 for 100? I want to say it used to be $500 for 10, or I
I'm
haven't
not
looked in a
100%
while.
sure. I know that the bulk pricing, it's like, do bulk pricing. Again,
Right.
if you're going to write a lot of books, do bulk pricing, because the individual prices, even the package for 10, are very, very expensive, but the price drops precipitously at higher volume. I guess you could also go in like cohort with a bunch of other people and then just get bulk that way.
Maybe. I haven't looked to see if they allow that.
That's why I said I
All right.
guess. Always
Okay.
with qualifiers.
Yes. Always double check. We're not the ISBN experts, clearly. Affiliate links. What do they do? Where do we get them? What is the proper usage?
Okay. Affiliate links track clicks and earn you a kickback from the purchases that are made through those clicks. So for like Amazon affiliate links, you make the affiliate link and it takes them to Amazon, and then any purchases made off of that session that went to Amazon through your click, you get kickback money from. Other places like Apple's got affiliate links, and Google, and tons of them. Those are more specifically book related, but still they track where the thing came in and give you some money as a thank you for sending traffic to their site. Proper usage is like, the proper usage is sort of just having them there so that people can find them. Like, if the link on your site should be an affiliate link, that's the sort of thing.
But
Indies
not,
more.
I should say, not your email address,
Not your email. Yeah.
unless you're willing to risk it, because I've used them before and Amazon hasn't come down on me, but I've heard from other authors that they have gotten just kicked out of the affiliate program for using them. For some reason, Amazon doesn't want you to do them, but it's nice because it's the best way really to track and see if you got a sale, how many sales you got, and how many clicks you got from that specific link. But you can use them on your social media sites that are under your name, like your Facebook page and your website. And I'm not sure if Barnes & Noble and Apple and those guys care. I haven't really done that much with their affiliate programs. I tried Apple at one point, and I think I got no money from them, even though I'm pretty sure I was sending traffic and selling books. This was a few years ago, so I haven't gone back recently to see if it's a little better. But go ahead, Joe. I jumped in the middle there.
Yeah. Really, the only other thing I could say about affiliate links is that audiobooks, it used to be Audible would give you a bounty if your book was the first book anybody purchased on Audible. Now you need to send them to Audible with your affiliate link in order to get the bounty. So I've never really used Audible affiliate links before, but now I sort of have to if I want to get a bounty, and I still haven't started, because while I gave advice on how to sell audiobooks, I have not devoted a tremendous amount of effort into selling audiobooks specifically. So that's another area where affiliate links are very important if you're hoping to make the absolute most you can off of them.
Right, that's something I need to start doing too, because I actually would occasionally get the bounties, and it was $50. I'm not sure if it's still 50 or they raised it to 75. Do you know? Is it still 50?
I know it changed. I don't know how it changed.
Yeah, there was some changing going on there for a while, but yeah, you have to you have to remember when you're going to email your newsletter, which may be worth it if you're plugging a new audiobook to thousands of people, to go in and just get their affiliate link for, it's a specific one for each book. You have to just go in your dashboard on ACX and you can grab it, because those bounties are actually worth it. And then the Amazon stuff, you usually get a lot of like 8 cents. You know, if somebody bought a $3 ebook or something, every now and then you get somebody buying something that's a couple $100 that you get credit for because they came and bought it on the same shopping session or within 24 hours or whatever it is. I actually do use the affiliate links, and if you want to be totally legit and still use them with an email newsletter, you can just link in your newsletter to your page on your website that has all the stuff about the book and the links to the various stores. And so you're sending them to your site, and then from your site to the store. You just have to decide, is it worth possibly losing somebody because they have to make an extra click? But I feel like your affiliate income should easily cover your mailing list monthly costs. If you didn't artificially inflate your newsletter by doing a lot of promos and getting a lot of people that are not buyers. Not that there's a time and a place. There's nothing wrong with doing that, but be aware that the cost may go up faster than you're earning money to cover the costs every month. I hardly do any effort on the newsletter. I just throw in the affiliate links, like I said, for a new release audiobook or something like that, and it covers the cost of the newsletter hosting.
I looked it up, and it is $75. But interestingly enough, depending on which FAQ you look at on Audible, it still mentions the old affiliate program, the old bounty program. So confusing on the ACX site. But otherwise, yes, it's $75 now.
Right. We should say we're recording in March of 2019, depending on when you listen to this, because I think they bumped it up to 75 when they changed the system. But then they decided to have a couple more months where the old system still worked because people were complaining or something. So we don't know what's going to happen going forward in the future. You probably need to use those links, though. All right, next question. Writing workshops. How can writers find them? Is there a way to see if they're good/worth the money? Are there online options?
I have never used a writing workshop or looked for one, so I have to bow out on this one. I'm sure they're useful, but I have focused very little on craft because mostly early on I was writing books because I was like, I want people to hear my story. And then once people started buying them, I'm like, well, I must be good enough at writing because people are buying them. So that was my dopey take on getting better at writing, just practicing a lot.
I did online writing workshops. I briefly did an in-person one with like a sci-fi focused group back in Seattle. And I found for myself as an introvert, the online writing workshop was very useful. The one I did, and they still exist, is the Science Fiction and Fantasy Online Writing Workshop. Just Google them and you'll find them. And then there's critters.org. I think they're still around, although I think they might have had to bow out of Europe because of our laws that we had last year. I already forgot the acronym because of email list issues.
Oh, yeah, I forgot the acronym too. But yeah, I know what you're talking about.
GDR or something. But so critters.org is an online one, and the Sci-Fi and Fantasy Writing Workshop is an online one. Critters, I believe, is still free. It's a thing where you get a batch of stuff to critique each week, and I think you have to do like a certain number, and then you can put something in the queue for critique. The Sci-Fi Online Writing Workshop was, I'm not sure how much it is now, might be GDPR is the, the email thing from last year. It was about $60 a year when I was there. It might be more like 80 by now. I haven't been back since like 2009 or so. But I found it very worthwhile when I came into this. I actually was with them 2 different times in that 7-year span. I was kind of working on my first novel, and I think they started out being owned by Del Rey or something like in the late 90s. And at the time, I thought basically the only way was to get an agent and a publisher and go that route. So I was kind of just, this is how you have to do it. And so I just wanted to become as good of a writer as I could. And so I found it's just super good learning experience for myself. as kind of a tactile learner or kinetic learner, whatever the term is, where you kind of have to do something, and that's the best way you learn, as opposed to, I have a hard time, I've admitted before on the show, just reading something in a book doesn't really help me that much. Hearing something as a lecture doesn't help me as much as actually doing it. So in the writing workshops that I was in, you would critique other people's stuff and they would critique your stuff. And a lot of the people in the online workshops were at varying degrees. They'd already like sold to magazines, and some of them have already sold to a publisher. And then you had some brand new people. And it was interesting. You could get really good critiques from just some random person that they've been reading their whole life, and even if they haven't published anything yet. And I learned a lot from critiquing other people. I learned what didn't work and why it didn't work. And I learned also from having my stuff ripped apart. My first story, it's tough. Even if you're a good writer, other writers are a very hard audience. So you'll get people just tearing stuff apart, and it's kind of hard on your ego. But if you go into it like it's a learning experience, I feel like it was really good. Like I became a much more competent writer, and I would say a little more confident after I would actually sold some short stories. So I'm glad I went through that whole process before self-publishing kind of became a thing, and I switched to paths to like, hey, I'm going to self-publish instead of trying to get an agent and a publisher. So I certainly recommend them. I've heard people argue that they're not good because they teach everybody to write the same, because there's kind of a lot of like, don't use adverbs. There's sort of this common advice that you always see going around in critique groups. But I feel like it's kind of a hardening process. Like you go through that and you try to take out all the adverbs, and then you try to make sure you're doing all the things you're supposed to do. But then gradually you kind of learn what you like and what works, and you start selling some stories, and you become, I think, more confident in your own writing style, having gone through that gauntlet of, like no adverbs, no was, were, or to be verbs in the story, whatever is the latest thing that's going around in writing advice. But, I think if you can get through there and keep some of your style, and it's a good experience. I think it's kind of a mistake to just go out and self-publish the first thing you write, because it's easy now. Most authors that you love and adore and that do really well, they'll say like, it was like my 5th book that I sold to traditional publishing and got published. And then they'll tell you like their first book was crap if they look back at it now and were honest with themselves, So definitely online options. And if you're in a big city, you can probably find something, maybe try Craigslist or a library. There's often little in-person critique groups if that's more your style. If you want to, I always found it more easy to be honest online to other people than to tell them to their face. They're like, oh, this kind of sucks. Okay, next question is the top 100. What does it mean to be in the top 100, presumably in Amazon? What can be learned by looking at the top 100 in genres we might be writing in?
Okay. The most obvious and immediate answer, being in the top 100 means you sold a lot of books quickly. And those are two important things. In fact, I think on Amazon, depending on how the algorithm is working, you might have sold a lot of books quickly and then continued to sell books at some level afterward, because occasionally the rumor has it Amazon will sort of clip the spike of your sales if it's because of a promo. So because they like ongoing sales better. But in general, you sold a lot of books quickly, and it is an indicator of current success, not future success. Like you can aim for the top 100. It's great to be in the top 100, but getting there does not mean that you've now made it and you're just going to be an author going forward. There aren't a ton of people who are just clicking on the genre list and browsing the top for books anymore. So ranking high doesn't necessarily get you new readers in that way, although it will get you some. If that's the way you're hoping to get new readers, then it's actually more important to be in the top 20, I think. It depends. See, you want to be on the first page of the top of your genre list, because that's one extra click to get to number 21 if it's still the top 20. That being said, too, having a high rank builds reader confidence. Like when you scroll down and look at a book, it'll eventually get to where the book is ranking, and you're going to see where it ranks in all the various subgenres. If a book ranks pretty high, that's another vote of confidence for the book. You'll hear people say that this doesn't matter, but at least I, as a book buyer, occasionally will go down and say, oh, wow, this book looks good. And apparently a lot of other people agree with me. So that's a thing. What can you learn from looking at the top 100? Here's what you're going to learn. you will learn who recently had BookBubs, because I would say that the top 100 is largely composed of people with recent BookBubs. B, the people who are more in more popular genres who are looking to get away with a subgenre they think they can top out in. If you are publishing urban fantasy, you're probably going to learn that there's a lot of people with paranormal romance who feel like they can get away with urban fantasy. So you'll see that. But C, and the most useful one of these, you'll see covers, blurbs, and plots that seem to be selling well at this precise moment. The tricky bit is sifting through and finding the ones that are selling well on the merit of those things, as opposed to just because they've recently promoted or they've come from a more popular genre and are trying to top out in a subgenre. But if you go through and you find, like, especially as you get down into like the 20 through 40 range, and those are probably things that got there organically, you'll start to see themes of covers. I just did a ton of research on urban fantasy to see how I should be constructing my covers, and you pretty quickly learn that urban fantasy covers fall within a very narrow range of appearances, and that you determine that by looking at the bestsellers. I haven't gone through looking at plots and blurbs in the same way, but likewise, you can learn a surprising amount of the tropes that are necessary for a genre if you're writing to market from looking at what books are selling well in that market. So that's my assessment of the top 100.
Sounds pretty good to me. And just to be very literal with our definition, we should say, what does it mean to be in the top 100 on Amazon? It's the top 100 most selling and / most borrowed books within a given time. And it's not a 24-hour thing. There seems to be, I think Phoenix Sullivan over at Kboards did like a big analysis, and like you get most credit for stuff that's sold in the last 24 hours, but then you get like a half credit for stuff that was sold that week or something. So it's not just like what sold best today. That's not all that's factored into it, but that does weight highly. And you will notice from looking at the top 100 overall on Amazon that it's very hard to get in there with sci-fi and fantasy. You'll see authors hit it briefly, often with new releases, very popular sci-fi and fantasy authors, but it tends to be romance is a lot of what's in there. And within our own top 100 genres, like Joe was saying, you can kind of see what the market's buying right now, what's popular. And if you are looking to write to market, that's when it can be really useful to analyze this stuff. Or if you just have a book that you wrote to your heart and wasn't to market, you might be able to do a cover, like Joe was saying, do the typical urban fantasy cover just to give yourself a better shot than something different than what is in the top 100. I would say covers, judging the covers in there, looking at what's selling can be really helpful for putting together your book package. That's probably about it. I do think it helps with sales. I feel like, I don't know how many people actually surf through there. I always used the also bots, but as a reader, but as a reader too, I do sometimes check the top 100s, and it can be a little hard to tell because you don't know how much people are putting into advertising. If you see one book there month in and month out, chances are that particular book's doing well enough to afford the cost of the advertising, and so it's worth it for the author.
I will say this too about top 100 is one thing that people are very interested in is how many book sales are necessary for the top 100. And that's a very good question. Like we've talked about it on the show a lot, but it's for the top 100 overall on Amazon. We're talking potentially 10,000, certainly many thousands. For smaller subgenres, not so much. But still, we'll put it this way too. The top 100 on Amazon, which is going to very frequently be attained by people who are Amazon exclusive, is not to be confused with any of the bestseller lists like USA Today or New York Times, because Amazon exclusive books don't make those lists because there's a multiple retailer requirement. So those are other aspects of top 100 that you might need to consider. What kind of a checklist of things? Oh, I should also, by the way, just because it makes me feel good, Jeff on here says that he has no need to repeat any information because I gave a hell of a definition. So thanks, Jeff. Next question is, what kind of checklist of things do each of you do when preparing to release a book, i.e. reviewing editorial notes, getting a copyright, etc.? I will go through my checklist. And and I'll say this right off. You talk about getting a copyright. Well, I'll get to that at the end of my little list. But my book release checklist post beta read is as follows. I arrange time on the schedule of my editor. My editor is actually plural. I have 2 editors, and I can keep them pretty busy if I'm in a good writing thing. So I often actually just reserve a slot, regardless of whether or not I have anything to put in it. And then when the time comes, just give them whatever's ready. I arrange a cover. This I can usually do a little bit closer to release because it doesn't take nearly as long to make a cover as it does to edit a book. Once I get the cover back, I've usually already gotten the edit back, so then I can apply edits, and then I write a blurb. I always wait until toward the end to write the blurb because depending on how the beta read and all that went, the book might have changed. So write blurb, and then once the blurb is written, I submit it for pre-order and start preparing the blog post, the Facebook post, the newsletter, Twitter announcements, and all that stuff. So that's my book release checklist. But again, talking about copyright, I don't always copyright my stuff like through the copyright office. I've copywritten at this point probably most of my books, but it's very strange, and I've looked into this. The only really important date when it comes to when your book was copyrighted is before someone sued you or before you sued someone. Your book in the United States is automatically copyright you as soon as you've released it. Having the actual physical copyright just gives you a couple of extra bonuses if you're in a court case. Usually it means that you can, by the way, not a lawyer, so look into this stuff elsewhere. But generally speaking, as long as you have the copyright before you get into a court case, you have the full value of the copyright, even if you got it the day before the court case. So I don't always do all my own copyrights. Such is the case in America. I will now move on to Jeff's to-do list. Jeff likes to arrange a cover, usually once he hits the halfway mark in his book. He arranges to have the book edited. It takes about 2 weeks for him, which gives him time to write the blurbs. And once he's written the blurbs, he starts arranging any advertising he may need to. And then he does the newsletter blast. So that's where Jeff is.
All right, apologies for dog interruptions on my end. That was Willow. She's developed quite a deep voice. Don't start. No. As far as a checklist of what I do when I release a book, pretty much the same as the guys. First I write it, then I go through, do one editing pass, and send it to my beta readers. I usually start the next book while they're going over the last one. I get their feedback back and make any changes that I feel I agree with. Then I send it to my regular editor, often working on another project while she has it, get it back, send it out to typo hunters, which I did not originally do, and I'm so glad that I do this now. Like I used to have, there's always like 20, 30 word flubs or missing things that get past both you and your editor. And I've got a couple folks that have really good eyes and catch most of the stuff now, which is nice now that Amazon has started doing alerts if people complained about a typo or something, and you have to, with some of my older stuff, I wasn't formatting the book, so it's a pain to go back and get it reformatted or format it from scratch. So love the typo hunters. Those are just from my fan base is where I grabbed those folks. I kind of try to reward the ones or really encourage the ones that have good eyes. They get a free early copy, and a couple times a year I'll send them a gift certificate from Amazon. As far as copyright, I generally don't bother. Same with editorial reviews, or I guess that was editorial notes that he was asking about. I don't try to get reviews anymore, definitely not from anybody other than the readers. I will occasionally ask at the back of the book, kind of depending on the book. Sometimes I feel it's more important to encourage people to get onto my mailing list. I usually only ask for one thing at the back of the book, so I kind of pick and choose there. But if it's like a solo book or something, I'll often ask just like, hey, if you liked it, please leave a review. Don't do a whole lot of stuff. I'll just go into marketing at that point. Sometimes I do a pre-order for a couple weeks, so I can, especially with a book one in a new series, so I can get the links to send out and try to get, any of the sites that will announce new releases. I'll go ahead and sign up for those. And that's about it, I think. I tend to do all the marketing spiel, and I don't generally ask other people to announce things in their newsletters. It's just not my thing, because I don't really want to announce other people's stuff that I haven't read in my newsletters. So I just spend some money on advertising, boost a Facebook post for sort of that 2-3 weeks around the release of the book. And then if it seems to still have legs and it's doing well and still in the top 100 we talked about, I'll leave like AMS ads running. Got some whining dogs here, so I'm going to just go ahead and try to wrap this up since somebody doesn't want to let me have a peaceful podcast tonight. Moving on to the last question is from James. You mentioned in the most recent episode that you thought also bots at Amazon might be on the way out. Does that mean that pen names aren't important anymore? And if they are, is it worth republishing books under pen names if they aren't in the same genres? Go ahead.
Okay, obviously this is both speculation and opinion here, but does that mean pen names aren't important anymore? Pen names are still important in a couple of situations. If what you are writing is the sort of thing that might turn off or offend your other, like, the pre-existing fans, like if the prime example is always like erotica. If you have written something that's like young adult or intended for children and all that stuff, and you've got a lot of those books and you've got an established fan base there, and then you decide you're going to do something that is extremely not okay for that fan base, regardless of also bots, you should absolutely have a second pen name. Because even if it's not showing up in also bots, people who really enjoyed one of your books are likely to go in and see what else you've written. And if they're not careful and make the assumption that every other book you have is going to be like the book they read, then they could encounter one or more books that really they don't like. So yeah, I definitely think pen names are still useful in that regard. Is it worth republishing books under pen names if they aren't in the same genres? It's basically the same answer. Generally speaking, if they're not in the same genres, I would probably keep them under the same name unless they are drastically different and not appropriate for the same reader base. It's we mentioned in an earlier answer, it's a lot of work to do another pen name well. So if you're not going to be feeding it enough books, or you don't feel like doing that much work, as long as your stuff is relatively okay for all the same sort of people, I think it's probably okay to have them all under the same name. There is some benefit to having pen names for different genres, but again, it takes a lot of legwork to make it worthwhile. But if your stuff is likely to offend some of your audience or simply be inappropriate for some of your audience, absolutely put it under a pen name, because they will find your other books, and you will at the very least get some review scores that are not worth having out of confusing or just offending your readers. So that's my pen name spiel.
All right. I think it's early to say for sure if the also bots are going to go away. They've been in and out. Other things have been swapped in. I just looked while Joe was talking at somebody's author page, and there were also bots on it. But a few days ago, I looked, and it was like recommended products was in there, and it showed some stuff I'd already purchased. So that was horrible. I hope Amazon throws that to the curb right away. And I also hope we don't just end up with 3 carousels of ads. Just as a reader, if anything else, I found the also bots very useful. So I'm hoping they'll continue to be a thing. But if they do go away, I wouldn't let it dictate how you publish to, it's kind of hard to say what's going on behind the scenes with Amazon. Just because they don't display the also bots doesn't mean that they're not still part of the algorithm that's kind of recommending books to people. And the pending thing, I don't think any of us have actually worried about it. I did start my pen name secretly, but not really because I was worried about hosing up my also bots, just because I wanted to see if I could, start from scratch and still do well at that point in time. But I know we've had folks on that will start a new pen name for every genre, and I've said why I wouldn't do that. It's a lot of work. It's hard to keep things selling once you move on to other projects. But the argument, if for those who aren't sure what James's question was about, is just that if you write epic fantasy and you start writing space opera and you don't do a pen name, you're going to get like in your also bots, it's going to be kind of a confusing tangle of, and you'll see if you look through my stuff, there's some some things get weighted by just recent releases, but I've certainly had stuff like Epic Fantasy come out with Ruby Lion Drake's man chest covers in the also bots, because I have readers that just buy anything, which is a good problem to have, but it can make it a little confusing if Amazon is not sure who to recommend your books to, as much as if everybody who loves urban fantasy is reading your urban fantasy, that's who they'll recommend it to. So it may possibly hurt you a little bit if it's not clear to Amazon who the target audience is for your book. So it's up to you. I would wait and kind of see how things pan out before changing your strategy. All right, that's about it for tonight. My dog does not want to settle down, so I guess we'll close it off. Joe, do you have anything else left you want to mention?
Nope, that's about it. I mean, I got the urban fantasy experiment going. I don't think you're going to learn anything new from me regarding this experiment, because I'm going to be using a subset of the lessons taught on this very show. So there's not going to be anything experimental and Joe specific to it. So if you're waiting for that experiment to run and hoping that you'll see something new from it, just go back and watch the episodes about rapid release, and you'll just see me doing that poorly, basically. So that's all I got in my immediate future.
All right, and like I said at the beginning of the show, we're going to take a little break, and if there's, I don't know if we'll like restructure things when we maybe come back, but if there's something you want to see, or you just want to chime in on what are your favorite kinds of episodes, come on by marketingsff.com. This is episode 223, and look forward to hearing from you. If nobody says anything, we'll quietly go into the night, but I know there's at least some people out there that listen. You guys have told me so at the convention. So thank you so much for listening for 200 and odd episodes, and hopefully we'll be back in the summer, and maybe with a slightly different, I don't know, format. We'll see. Thanks for listening, everyone. Have a good week, or a good couple months too.
Thanks for everything, everybody. So long.